And here we are. The final stretch of the regular season has officially arrived. The playoff picture has all but formed, and this is going to be the final week of play for the Eastern Conference before the play-in tournament, and there's still one spot up for grabs. That and so much more is all on the line in what should be a very exciting week that you don't want to miss. My plan is to maybe go a bit lighter on the games that don't matter as much, so we can focus more on the big ones. How about we get right into this week's action, shall we? Here's my preview and predictions for Overwatch League Season 5, Week 23. And starting us off is the Spark and Dynasty. For Seoul, every win is going to count here towards getting the highest possible seed, so expect them to go all out in this one. But honestly, the Spark need this one a lot more. If they even lose one game, they're going to be forced to participate in the play-ins next week. They need an absolute flawless week to even stand a chance. And honestly, they've been playing a bit better as of late, so maybe there is some reason to have more confidence. Well, at least that's what I would say if they weren't playing Seoul. The Dynasty are the most dominant team in the region by far, and they really need this one too. And they're playing a Spark team who is 0-4 this stage. It does not take much of a genius to understand that Seoul likely take this in a 3-0. The Spark are just the worst team in the region by far currently, and Seoul are a lot better in this type of dive-heavy meta for sure. There's no need to really put any more thought into it. But now we get into the big stuff, the most important game of the entire week. Circle this one down. It is the Valiant and the Charge. As it currently stands, the Valiant are 1 point behind Guangzhou in the standings for the final play-in spot in the East. So if the Valiant lose this game, they are officially eliminated. It is do or die time. And for Guangzhou on the other side, you really do not want to be losing this one. If it comes down to a tiebreaker, they're absolutely screwed since LA have the better map differential. This game is massive, and it appears to be pretty evenly matched. So based on how the two sides have performed, I'd say that they're in a pretty similar spot. Lots of clutch moments and close games against similar opponents. Both teams also have certain advantages they can attempt to press in this matchup. For the Valiant, they can hope to maybe push ahead through a superior tank flexibility. The Charge are going to have a lot less options since they mostly just play Piggy on the Zarya, so you can try and do your best to play around whatever tank works better on the map you're on. They can choose to match or maybe go with Marvel's Winston, or maybe the Sombra will be the thing that gets you where you need to be. Meanwhile, the Charge play a slightly more brawly and less Sombra-centric style, and that could give this Valiant team some trouble as they've often capitalized on being better than their opponents with better dive follow-up. By ignoring that completely and just pocketing Piggy and Choice A1, you do run the chance of making your opponent feel pretty unprepared. This is so incredibly close, and it's a must-win scenario, so don't be surprised if this one goes the distance. As for who I favor, I'm leaning slightly towards the Valiant. It's not by a lot, but I really do like how they've played recently. They seem very motivated, and it would just be really cool to see them pull off a late season surge. It feels like destiny after all the horrible stuff that's gone down for all of the players and the staff. This team has already clutched out 3 huge map 5s this stage, and because they've gotten over that curse at least a little bit, they seem like they're ready for just about anything. It's a gut feeling purely and nothing more, but I'm going to pick the Valiant to win this series 3-2. They'll use the Guangzhou Charge's lack of range to their advantage, as I think the synergy between EasyHan, Marvel, and Becky should continue to really be clutch here. They're going to capitalize on their hot streak and regain the lead. Moving on to the West, we start off with the Houston Outlaws versus the Paris Eternal, and let's keep it brief. Houston can clinch 4th place in the West officially with a win here, and considering they're playing the worst team in the league who absolutely have nothing to play for at this point, you'd expect the Houston Outlaws to not squander this opportunity and win quite handily. It's been a bit since we've seen them play, but they've got to be feeling pretty confident after finally defeating their rival Shock team. They're not going to mess around here, and they'll probably just win in a sweep so they can lock in for the playoffs. There is absolutely nothing that Paris can do to stop them here, so it's a GG go next kind of situation. Following up will be the Boston Uprising versus the Washington Justice. These two are rather close in the standings, but Boston is currently stuck at 10th, so the only real stakes come through Washington, who are trying to maintain the 8 seed. On paper, the matchup itself could end up being pretty good. It's been a bit since they've played, but Boston did look really good in their first week during this qualifier. The unit is playing very well around Punk, and it's clear that Crimzo and MCD are making a huge difference in this kind of double flex support meta. Boston are starting to gain some momentum here at the end of the season, and I get the feeling they're going to try and keep it at all cost. And luckily for Boston, they have already beaten this Washington team once before this year, and the Justice are notoriously bad at being consistent. Sometimes they look good, other times they have ugly losses, and you never know what version of them is going to come out to play. At their peak, they're definitely better than Boston, but after what I saw last week, I'm not exactly convinced that they're in the best place. I kind of get this feeling that the underdogs are going to win this, so let's go with Boston in a 3-1. Aside from DPS, Washington don't have a ton of advantages, and even that position battle could be kind of close based off of what we saw during week 1. Not only that, but Crimzone MCD might be a little too much for the Washington backline to keep up with. That's the big factor here that I believe blows this game wide open for Boston as they continue their late season winning streak. Ending Friday is the Vancouver Titans and the Florida Mayhem, and oh boy, I really do hope that Florida made use of their off week, because what we saw in week 1 was not pretty. There's still time to move out of the 9 seed in the West, so Florida have to play with some urgency here. On a very general surface level, this feels like a trap game. Vancouver have absolutely nothing to play for here, so they're not going to be easy to take down. But if I know the Mayhem, this is when they're going to start to wake up, as they have a tendency to do that, and they have all the right pieces to make it happen in this type of meta. Someone on Winston, checkmate on Genji, and double flex support comps. They should feel right at home. All they really need is better execution at this point, and now that they've had a week to improve and prepare, I expect to see that happen, so I'm going to be picking the Mayhem in a 3-1 scoreline. There's some serious upset potential in this one, but the Titans are rather inconsistent and I'd say one-dimensional. The Mayhem have the better playmakers, the extra preparation, and the flexibility to get this done. From there, we have the Hangzhou Spark taking on the Guangzhou Charge, which could be interesting depending on the final result of Guangzhou versus the Valiant. If the Charge were to lose that match, then this game becomes absolutely massive. So let's assume the Valiant do end up winning. Well, in that case, all of the pressure in the world is on the Guangzhou Charge, and that is not good. Going up against a rival team who are licking their lips at the chance to ruin your plans is a pretty terrifying thought, especially when considering how badly the Spark want to get back in the W column. The Charge are absolutely the better team as it currently stands, but life does work in bizarre ways sometimes. A Spark team who will likely be 0-5 entering this match are so overdue for a victory, it is not even funny. And last week they did get awfully close. It's been a while since Shy's taken over a match as well, and now seems like a really inopportune time for the Charge for him to figure it out. It feels like destiny, and I have no way to actually explain my reasoning here, but my gut is telling me to go 3-2 Spark. Maybe this is a huge mistake, but I just can't shake the feeling that the Valiant magic is way too strong in this scenario. The scriptwriters just have something to say about this, and they really want this result to become a reality. The Spark are sick and tired of losing as well, and they're facing zero pressure, so now seems like the time for them to do the Valiant a favor. They have absolutely no right to win this game with how they've played, but the gods will make it happen. From there, you've got the LA Valiant versus the Shanghai Dragons. And again, same deal as the last game. The importance of this match definitely comes down to the final result of the first game between the Charge and the Valiant. In the result that the Valiant win this match, or the Charge match I should say, they're going to have to keep applying pressure. There is absolutely no guarantee in the world that they make it, even if they do win their match against the Charge, as Guangzhou have the easier second opponent by far, so you got to consider this must-win territory still. And Shanghai are not exactly the opponent that you want to be running into if you're the Valiant, since they tend to do not well against them. Although, if there ever was a time to break the losing streak, it would certainly be now. Shanghai have looked pretty awful in the current meta, and the Valiant have genuinely been pretty competent. Shanghai don't have anything to play for at this point since they're basically locked into the 5 seed for the playoffs, so that's going to help too. This could be hard Valiant hopium, but I'm going to say they take this in 5. It's not going to be easy since Shanghai are obviously way more talented, but the Valiant want this way more, and they've looked really good in this Sombra meta, so I'm going to be hard rooting for them after all the nonsense they've gone through with this terrible org. I mean, truthfully, they deserve this bit of happiness after all they've gone through, and they look completely dialed in with this new meta. They're grinding hard, and their teamwork looks well polished for once. Now is the time for them to show off their hard work and determination as they clinch a play-in spot. This would be a storybook finish, and it would be really great for Dia, so let's make it happen. Moving on to the next game, we've got the Philly Fusion versus the Chengdu Hunters, and this one is pretty meaningless, so don't expect either team to go all out. I'm assuming that Philly would not like to go 0-4 against Chengdu this year, so maybe they do play with a little motivation, but sadly, this does kind of feel like an uphill battle, as Philly have only looked good against the weak opponents in this stage. Meanwhile, Chengdu have literally been dead even with every opponent they've faced. This meta slightly favors the Hunters DPS to me, as Jinmu gets his signature pick and Leave is getting both of his arguably, and Chengdu have always been a pretty decent Sombra team, so that definitely helps too. And if that wasn't enough, Philly are just cursed against the Hunters. There's like no way of explaining it. They're on a long losing streak against them that spans over a year now. It's like 5+, I believe. Now, with this in mind, Philly should in theory be overdue for a win against these boys, but for the memes, I intend to pick the Hunters in a 3-1 scoreline. I almost always pick Philly to beat Chengdu, and I regret it every single time, so how about we trust in the Hunters for a change, so they hopefully make me not look like a fool. Looking back into the West, the Atlanta Reign are going to take on the Florida Mayhem in the first slot. And again, it's worth noting that Florida have not played in quite some time, so we don't know how much they've actually improved since the last time we saw them play, and for all we know, they could end up catching Atlanta off guard, or on the other hand, they could look really terrible again. I mean, if there ever was a time to start winning again, it would be right now, since the Reign, they have kind of showed a tendency recently to blow leads, like they can't hold on to them for their lives. They almost got reverse swept by Toronto, they did get reverse swept by the Shock, and the Mayhem on the other hand have made quite a few comebacks this year. I believe 3 reverse sweeps at this point, so that's not a very good mix. However, the Reign have absolutely shown more promise in this meta overall so far. This is definitely a trap game for Atlanta, but it does feel tough to go against them as they are winning games still, and I'm of the belief that the Shock game maybe served as a wake-up call, seeing as how they played against the Justice later in the week. It's going to allow for them to finish strong this stage, so due to their more trustworthy nature, I'll be picking the Reign in a 3-1. When it's clutch time and the stakes are at their highest, this team usually shows up. A win would seal their trip to the playoffs, and I don't think they screw this up. And now you've got the LA Gladiators taking on the Washington Justice, and I'd say this is a pretty unlucky pairing for Washington. They're coming off a mediocre week, and now they have to play a top-level title contender. The Justice desperately need a win to clinch the 8th seed, but I fear that they're not going to get it here, as the Glad still have something to play for. A good week for them, plus either a poor week out of the Shock or Dynasty, could offer the opportunity to move up to a higher playoff seed. So to put it simply, they have to try. How they played against the alexyOWL is maybe a little concerning, but because they're so talented, I doubt it's going to happen again, and they're just way more consistent than this Justice team and are way more likely to show improvement. I feel pretty confident going with the Gladiators in a 3-0. When they're on, we literally see Kevster and Happy win fights by themselves, and with Shu starting to pop off like crazy on the Zen, there is no way they can lose. There's just too many high-level playmakers for a mediocre team like Washington to handle. Shouldn't be too much of a contest, so let's move on to the next one, which is one of the more exciting matchups of the week. We have the Battle of Texas going down in our next key match of the week. Dallas, to put it simply, are on a massive hot streak, and Houston might be feeling pretty confident as well because, again, they just beat the Shock recently. And just to make this event even better, this is going to be at a LAN setting in Arlington, Texas. Even if this game ends up an absolute blowout, it's not going to matter, as the atmosphere is likely to be electric. So, in a way, I'd consider this to be must-watch Overwatch. The Battle of Texas is always a good time, and this one could be particularly close, as the Houston DPS are really starting to feel themselves, and the addition of Creative seems to be working wonders in an Ana meta. If Houston managed to get their DPS going early, and maybe take advantage of a potentially stronger double flex support combo, they really might give the Fuel a run for their money here. However, this is a revenge match for Dallas, and they've been looking forward to it literally since week 1. Expect Dallas to look extra motivated, which is a terrifying thought, by the way, because they've been playing really good the last couple of months, arguably the best out of any team. The last thing that they need is extra motivation, and as good as Dante looked against San Francisco and everything, I highly doubt he's going to get away with the same stuff against a team of Dallas's caliber. Hanbin is simply on another level. I mean, he's arguably the MVP of the league, and the Fuel in general general are just in a better place. The Outlaws simply might have just taken advantage of a clear-cut struggling Shock team more than anything else, especially when considering their L to Boston. I would not count on the Outlaws to beat Dallas, so my pred is going to be a 4-map victory in favor of the Fuel. Hanbin might actually destroy this game. I fully expect to see some sort of tank diff, whether it be on Zarya or D.Va or both. And thanks to Doha, Dallas might have the better Sombra Tracer duo. When it comes down to all the game-deciding fights, you'd expect things to go the way of Dallas with the way they've been playing recently. As we head back into the East for the final pairs of games in the regular season for them, we've got a couple of games that, well, don't really matter. First is Shanghai and Chengdu. Both of these teams have absolutely nothing to play for. Trying and preparing is an absolute waste, and I'd expect them to prioritize rest over all else. But it's because neither team will give it their all that it would be really funny if we got a match that went the distance. Both teams taking turns throwing maps sounds way too good to be true, so let's say this goes all the way because why not? And for the memes, I'm going to be picking the Dragons to win. Shanghai have a tendency to play really weird in their final week. They don't really try, but at the same time they also do. It's very strange, and I can't really explain it. It happened last year, and I kind of think it happens again. They'll lose one game, then beat a rival team because why not? Chengdu are the better team for this meta, but I just can't shake the feeling that Shanghai will randomly win. And closing out your regular season in the APAC region is the Seoul Dynasty versus the Philadelphia Fusion. Philly here are facing a pretty tough battle. Seoul have looked way better throughout the entirety of this stage, and their dive comp looks damn near unstoppable as Prophet, Fitz, and Smurf are carving up the competition. The proactive Sombra style, plus, Smurf and Prophet just being gods, could give Philly a lot of trouble. EasyHan in particular kind of really rolled on MN3 and took him by surprise, and Seoul should be able to do it to an even greater extent in theory since they have the better coordination. Additionally, Seoul have Smurf and Iris, who have been way more consistent than their respective counterparts on Philly. Their impact has just been felt to a much greater extent, and when you combine all of these factors together and the fact that Seoul are trying to lock up the 2 seed in the playoffs, it's very, very difficult to see them dropping this one, especially when you realize that Philly themselves have nothing to play for unless the Spark somehow went 2-0 this week. Their playoff positioning is all but secured, so do not expect them to go all out. Jumping into the final day for the West, we start with the Titans versus the Eternal, and there ain't much to talk about. It's a very irrelevant matchup between two non-playoff teams. Not gonna lie though, I'm pretty happy for Vancouver as this could be the first time in a long time where they finished the regular season with a win. After the dominant splay against the Toronto Defiant, I don't think there's any reason not to pick them in a 3-0 against a much weaker team. Inconsistent or not, the Titans just have way more significant playmakers and better coaching on top of it, and it's very difficult to see the Paris Eternal having much of a chance with how terrible they look, and that's all there is to it. Next, you've got the Atlanta Reign versus the Dallas Fuel. And my approach with Dallas remains the same. They're on a hot streak right now, and they basically control their own destiny. A 2-0 week would officially clinch the #1 seed in the playoffs for them, so it's difficult to see the Fuel blowing that kind of opportunity, especially in this type of meta. They can play pretty much all of their favorite heroes. I mean, they can show off their dive coordination really well, and that's scary for Atlanta, who have generally been up and down so far. Dallas have this mixed attack since they can swap between the Winston and the Zarya depending on the map, and Atlanta in return only really have the Echo swap and maybe a strong backline, but that might not be enough considering how in control Dallas are of everything. The Fuel literally control the tempo. You've got to play fast in this meta, and Dallas are the absolute fastest, maybe besides Seoul. Atlanta are a lot more methodical, and that could be a problem in this situation, so I'm going to say that Dallas take it in 4 maps. Unless they manage to significantly slow down the pace, you should not like the Atlanta Reign's odds of making an upset happen, because it's just a way better meta for Dallas, and they've looked way too good to be stopped recently. They're overdue for a loss, but with the type of confidence they're playing, you would regret going against them right now. Anyway, the last game of the week will be the Boston Uprising versus the LA Gladiators, and take what I said in LA versus Washington and throw it right into this one. LA can climb even higher if a few things go their way this week. Going all out could ultimately be in their best interest for the playoffs, and Boston are a team we know they can handle. The Uprising seem alright in this kind of meta, but LA could end up having their number in a lot of places. A lot of Boston's biggest playmakers from 2 weeks ago are going to meet their match, as it's going to be tough for Valentine to outplay Kevster on the Tracer, and while MCD and Crimzo are a strong flex support combo themselves, I think that facing the elite duo of Shu and Skewed might be a bit too much for them, especially because Shu has looked really good on the Zen recently. In all fairness, MCD has looked really good too, but Shu absolutely has the better support around him, so it's more likely he's the one to pop off and take this game over. There's a lot that has to go right for the Boston Uprising to win here, so I like the Gladiators in a 3-1 scoreline. They have everything to play for right now, and Boston literally have nothing. And with how inconsistent Boston tend to be, putting this much trust in them would simply be a mistake. But that basically sums up my thoughts on the final game of the week, so with that said, that does it for my Week 23 preview and predictions. The APAC region in particular should be a lot of fun to watch this week, as it's headlined by a massive game between the Valiant and the Charge. It's the final week over there in that region, and there's a lot at stake here, so let me know what you think happens in that match, as well as the others, down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed today's video, and you want more content just like it, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel if you're new. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.